Okay, so what I want to look at today is actually to move out of the parsha of Bahar, because it's a double parsha, and I want to look at the parsha of bechuchotai. So bechuchotai starts, and it says, "Im bechuchotai telechu," if you will walk in my chukot. And the different understandings of what that means. But so it speaks about if you follow the path of Hashem and you do what you need to do, so then things will be fantastic. However, at the same time, the Torah then comes and says, okay, that's very nice if you do what you need to do. But what about im lo tishma'uli? What about if you don't listen to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks you to do? So this is really where I'd like to focus, because we'll see that the way the Torah presents this the space is actually important for us to really understand. So it says the words of I'm in chapter 26, verse 14. It says, "V'im lo tishma'uli." So if you will not tishma'uli, which we translate as you will not listen to me, v'lo ta'asu et kol ha'mitzvot ha'ele, and you won't do all these mitzvot, ve'im bechuchotai timasu, and if you will timasu means to like reject something that's meat or something that's like disgusting. If you feel that my chukot are disgusting, I'm just giving a basic translation. Ve'im et mishpatai tigal nafshechem, and you like your being feels like in a way revolted, or you spurn the things that or my mishpatim, that my certain rules. Levilti asot et kol mitzvotai, not to do all my mitzvahs. Lahafrechem et briti, in order to lahafir et habrit, means like to break the covenant. So then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that he's then going to bring a whole lot of different, we'll call them the curses, onto the Jewish people. So let's try and understand what this is all about. So come Rashi and says the following. V'im lo tishma'uli. The parasha starts in bechuchotai telechu. It starts if you will walk in my chukot, and then when it starts to look at the negative part, it doesn't say in bechuchotai timasu, starts off with rejecting the chukot. Rather, it says that the beginning of the process of the rejection of the space of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is v'im lo tishma'uli, if you will not listen to me. Rashi says, what does it mean, v'im lo tishma'uli? Liyot amelim b'Torah. Ladas midrash chachamim. What does it mean if you don't listen to Hashem? It means not to be amelim b'Torah, not to delve into Torah, to go into the depths of Torah, to understand what the chachamim were trying to express to us as what comes out of the Torah. What the Torah is, what Rashi is telling us is a number of things, but one of the things that's most important is that the concept of learning Torah is really listening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem talks to us in various ways. He gives us messages through the manner in which things occur in our lives, but he actually speaks to us as a proper conversation through Torah. We know we speak to him when we daven. He speaks to us through our learning of Torah. But it comes along, Rashi, and says, "V'im lo tishma'uli," if you'll not listen to me, it's talking about we have to be not only to hear words of Torah, but be a meilim in Torah. We've got to work hard. We've got to delve into the Torah. Why? Ladat midrash chachamim, in order to understand the nuances that chachamim saw within the words of the Torah. Because if we can understand the nuances of what chachamim saw in the Torah, so then we have an ability to realize the depth of the Torah.
Sorry,
Rabbi. He says, maybe it's talking about just doing the mitzvahs. Because you can't say that lo tishma'uli, that listening to Hashem means doing the mitzvahs, because later it says that you must do the mitzvahs. So how does it mean im lo ta'asu tishma'uli, that we don't listen li to me? Rashi throws out this idea that the word li means ein li. When it speaks about the word li, it means ela zeh hamakiret ribono makaven limrod bo. When it speaks about li, it means that you recognize the person who is speaking, the person from which the instruction comes, and you have absolute kavanah to rebel against him. And so therefore what this part of the Torah is speaking about, according to Rashi, is actually speaking about us understanding what Hashem wants. We know what Hashem wants from us. We understand who Hashem is, at least on a certain level, but Hashem says, if you rebel against me, specifically against me, then these things will happen. Mishelo tilmadu lo tasu, said Rashi. A very simple equation. If you don't learn, you can't do. Then there are two averas. The avera of not learning is not simply an avera that is its own. It's an avera that causes other things. And what is that? The avera of not being able to do. And that's really what the Rabbeinu Bachaya does. That Rabbeinu Bachaya takes this pasuk and he explains that in these two psukim, that they are actually imlo tishmeuli, imlo ta'asu, v'im bechuchotai mosu, v'et mishpatai tigal nafshechem, levilti asot tikom mishpatalav, v'chem et briti. They're actually 6 specific things sitting in these psukim, 6 averas in these 2 psukim, and ultimately there's a 7th one which is not doing the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says, why is that? He says because the minute you start the process of removing oneself from a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's this massive snowball effect, and that snowball effect leads us from one Avera to another. And that's what it says in Pirkei Avot, that Avera or Gereres Avera, one Avera causes to another Avera. Why? Because from the fact that you're not learning, you lead to the fact you're not doing, the fact you're not doing, then you're going to have im bechuchotai tim asu, which he explains is that you won't, because you don't understand, so therefore the things that you don't understand, you actually start feeling disgusting about. And not only that, then you start having negative sentiments towards the dayanim and to the dinim, the rules that they are presenting. And then you're going to start dealing in all the different things that then you're going to stop engaging in the halachas which are difficult. And he says the halachas are difficult according to the Rabbeinu Bachaya. It's such an important thing that the Netziv will also reflect on, which we'll look at now. He says, what are the things that we specifically kick back on? He says those are mishpatei hagezel v'ha'arayos. Firstly, the laws of gezel, of theft. And remember, theft is not just going and taking something from somebody. There's certain nuances within the space of theft. It's theft, v'ha'arayos, and all the sexual things. Sheruach habrius choimdin oisan, that people have a desire for them. You know, we think that we are very immune from certain desires, but just because I may be, doesn't mean that the people around me aren't. And so therefore comes along the Rabbeinu Bachaya, and he says, Kama kashem mi shemois mishpatei Hashem yitbarach itchil bahem bakan b'parsha zu. He said to how big it is that a person who initially doesn't want to listen to the words of Hashem ultimately comes to a place where he has such disdain, or she has such disdain for the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that everything gets thrown out. And that's where the Chazal are trying to understand that the beginning part of our movement away from Hashem, which is also the beginning part of our movement towards Hashem, has to be the space of the learning of Torah, because without that we're nothing. Comes along the Netziv, and the Netziv says that you might think that it's not such a big thing. Okay, so like Rashi said, Im lo tishme'u li, that you don't do it li, for me. In other words, you move away from Hashem as being the focus and the reason why you're doing the mitzvot, says the Netziv. He says, Ve'im ki be'emet, ein b'zeh achet kedo inish gadol. He says, okay, so if you don't do something lishma, you don't do a mitzvah or lishma, meaning for the sake of the mitzvah, which means because Hashem commanded you to do it. So ultimately it leads to doing it l'shem Hashem. We should be doing mitzvahs because Hashem told us to do that and connecting to it in that way. Comes along the Netziv and he says, but at least you're doing the mitzvah. What's such a big problem of not doing it l'shem Hashem, l'shmi? He says, the Torah says, is what is really trying to teach you the following. Eich darko shel yetzer hara, the way of the yetzer hara. It starts latchil b'davar katan. It starts with the small thing, v'noikei v'yoyred at a time, and then it starts breaking down the person's connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu until you're in the very depths of no connection. Mitchila mefate shelo lasot ishma. And how does it start? It starts by saying, do the mitzvah. But just don't forget about Hashem in the mitzvah. Just do the mitzvah. It's the right thing to do. And where do you find such things? Maaseh tzedakah v'chesed. Hanahug gam b'tevi Yisrael. Where do we find the most difficult space for us to connect with Hashem, because we're connecting with others? And that's tzedakah and chesed. When we do tzedakah and chesed, it's within our makeup. We know that the Bnei Israel are Rahmanim, Bashanim, Goim Lechasadim. Our very essence is to be connected to other people. Says the Netziv, what the Yetzer Hara does is tries to remove the Ribono Shel Olam's role in that tzedakah. And the minute that happens, it becomes the snowball effect that we spoke about. When we don't do it because it needs to be done in the name of Hashem, what? Then what happens is we stop doing it completely. And that becomes the real mantra for the Netziv and so many things that he says. And that is that we have to remember that it's not talking to me as an individual. It's talking to everybody around us. We have this concept called mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. The fact that you start shelo lishma, not for the right purpose. You're doing it for whatever reason, but the Torah has the power to give us the correct reason ultimately. He says the thing is that you can't rely on that as an individual. When you're doing that in a collective, so then my doing something maybe I won't do it lishma, but somebody will see me doing it and say, let me do what they're doing. I also want to be involved in this beautiful process. And so you get haskamat harabim. You get the agreement of the populace. But when everybody is doing it shelo lishma, everyone's doing it shelo lishma, there's nobody doing it with the right kavana, then what? Yosif usara shelo asos klal. They'll come to a point where it's not done at all. And I think in many ways, and this is going to be quite a controversial thing that I'm going to say, but I'd like to say it. I think in many ways the role of the traditional Jew that does the mitzvahs that they do, which are so beautiful and it's so wonderful, and South African Jewish society in many ways is built on that traditional Jew, is that as the generations go by, we're doing it more out of connection to what the past than out of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore it loses its concept of lishma or lishmi, to the sake of Hashem, and therefore it's difficult to hold on to. Because just because I have an emotional attachment to something that I did, to Pesach, to whatever it is, doesn't mean that my children will have the same emotional attachment, because there's no depth to it. The depth, what our grandparents had, is based on learning. Ours too has to be based on learning. It has to be based on understanding of what it is. We're understanding that it's connecting to Hashem through the performance of mitzvahs, and not that it's just a nice emotional thing that connects us to what was. And when we understand that, then we can realize how important it is for us, as Rashi said right at the beginning, liot amelim b'Torah. We have to learn it. We have to understand the depth of it, because it's in the depth that it moves from the heart into the head. And when it's into the head, when we understand it properly, then we do it in all the ways that we're supposed to do, and in that way connects to Hashem, and please God, maintain the sustainability of the beautiful traditions that we have. Have a beautiful day, everybody.